Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this week's edition of the Sunday Wire. I'm your host, Patrick Henningsen. We're streaming out live on X, on Facebook Live, Rumble, YouTube, and BitChute as well. Thank you for joining us for this weekly omnibus news and analysis video and radio program brought to you here on the Alternate Current Radio Network. And this is episode 534 of the Sunday Wire, and a lot of big stories have broken this week. We're still unpacking this disastrous meeting between Donald Trump and Netanyahu in Washington, and the announcement that was made by President Trump. It has caused an incredible backlash, and also it's just the reactions are mixed on this, and a lot of people are, quite frankly, confused as to what it means. And we're trying to get a read on this. And somebody, I think, who might be able to help us get a little perspective on this, we've had on the program before, and I'm very pleased to welcome onto the stage the former British ambassador to Syria and Bahrain. His name is Peter Ford, and he's joining us on the live link right now. Hold on, Peter Ford, thank you very much for joining us this week.
It's a pleasure and much to discuss.
Yes, indeed. There is much to discuss. And one of the big stories, of course, that we're trying to unpack is what just actually happened this week in Washington. It seemed to be going well for Trump in the first couple of weeks of this new administration. And sure enough, he drops this bomb on everybody. And I've got the clip here, Peter, and I want to get your reaction. We'll play this brief clip. It's kind of a highlight reel of the press conference with Netanyahu, where Trump's talking about his plans for the Gaza Strip, and then we'll get into the discussion. Here's the clip.
The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it, too. We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, level the site, and get rid of the destroyed buildings, level it out. I do see a long-term ownership position, and I see it bringing great stability to that part of the Middle East and maybe the entire Middle East. Everybody I've spoken to loves the idea of the United States owning that piece of land, developing and creating thousands of jobs with something that will be magnificent. We should go to other countries of interest with humanitarian hearts, and there are many of them that want to do this, and build various domains that will ultimately be occupied by the 1.8 million Palestinians living in Gaza. This can be paid for by neighboring countries.
Peter, I mean, what's not to like? He says he spoke to everybody. Everybody loves the idea. I mean, I don't know where to start here, but I'll give you the floor, Peter. Go ahead.
Well, I can give you two takes. The first boring take, which is the same as everybody else, roughly that Trump has lost the plot, he's demented, psychotic, and wholly in the pockets of the Israelis. This is probably correct. The second take is more interesting and probably wrong. But let me develop it. It's trying to explain it is not easy because the idea is so obviously impractical. I mean, leave aside the morality of it, leave aside the fact that it would be ethnic cleansing, forced displacement. It would be a war crime. We all know that. Perhaps most significantly, it's totally impractical because the Palestinian people simply could not be pushed over the border into Egypt because Egypt would not allow it. Even less could they be bussed across what's now Israel and the West Bank into Jordan. So in terms of practicality, it's a non-starter. Later in the week, Trump, under pressure, did concede that before any of this could happen, the Israelis would have to flatten what's left of Gaza, and this made it even worse, of course. But the key problem is that no way could Egypt or Jordan acquiesce in this ethnic cleansing. It's an absolute red line for them, for their own reasons of internal stability, leave aside sympathy for the Palestinians. And the idea is so crazy that we have to ask ourselves whether there isn't an ulterior motive, a hidden agenda. So let's be a little imaginative, a little bit charitable, if you like. And here's my theory, which, as I say, is probably wrong, but it's worth considering. Bear in mind that Netanyahu came to Washington, and the expectation was that he would tell Trump that he could not move to phase 2 of the Gaza ceasefire agreement. His partners, right-wing partners, extreme right-wing partners, wouldn't allow him to proceed to stage 2, which includes the full withdrawal of Israeli troops from Gaza and the release of the most important Palestinian political prisoners, including Marwan Barghouti, former Fatah leader, and Ahmed Sadat, former PFLP leader. So people have forgotten that this was what Netanyahu brought in his baggage, bad news, which was going to disappoint Trump, who set great store by his carefully crafted ceasefire agreement and its 3 phases. There wasn't going to be a phase 2, and therefore not all of the hostages would be got out because the right wing wouldn't allow it. Enter Trump with his crazy idea saying, oh, hang on there. I've got this. I'm going to take care of Gaza. And Netanyahu's message was blown out of the water. We heard nothing more about this idea that phase 2 would have to be abandoned. There was no way that the Israeli extreme right could turn Trump's offer down, even if it was totally impractical. They just could not. They also got blown away. And so Netanyahu has gone back carrying the message, hey guys, we've got to implement phase 2. And this is really quite important for the Palestinians to get those key political prisoners out and to get the Israeli military 100% out of Gaza. That to my mind, were really optimal gains for Hamas out of this whole episode. And that would be the result. Phase 3, which was supposed to be about reconstruction, well, who ever believed that? Phase 3 was never going to happen anyway. So the net result of Trump's statements, whatever the intentions were, maybe he didn't mean it, or maybe it was a cunning ploy just to get through phase 2. But the net result is that the ceasefire agreement will now be implemented, and we will reach a stage where the Israelis have left Gaza. That is going to make it more difficult for them to return. They can return, of course. They have the military might to wade into Gaza yet again, but they could do that anyway, regardless of what Trump says. I mean, it's not like Biden stopped them going in and totally destroying northern Gaza. So what Trump said, in a way, doesn't matter. But the effect has been that the Israelis do now have to carry out phase 2. So that makes 2 strikes for Trump. In the first place, his envoy more or less ordered the Israelis to agree to the terms of the ceasefire. And now strike two, Trump himself has cut the ground from under the far right. As I say, who knows whether this was intentional? I'm just saying that that is the net effect that we're losing sight of.
Yeah, that's a great point, Peter. What's the actual result? The process is messy, to say the least. I mean, that's an understatement. And so, what the other thing that it kind of revealed, though, is that there, the actual Israeli plan is, like Trump says the quiet part out loud by accident, like the unwieldy family member at the Christmas Thanksgiving dinner after a few drinks saying that embarrassing thing, which is that they want to ethnically cleanse Gaza. I mean, that's the agenda of the Israeli right. And a lot of people in the American evangelical right want to do that as well. So there is an agenda there. Whether it gets implemented or how or not at all, it is there. And it's been acknowledged. And I find that to be highly fascinating, looking at the lack of reaction from some other leaders, like British leaders and governments. Their policy has always been to recognize an occupation and pursue a two-state solution. This kind of throws a little bit of a spanner in the works. What do you make of that side of things, Peter?
Yeah, well, I do like to look on the bright side of things. And it's not entirely unhelpful that the US, that Trump's administration is now totally isolated in the world, except for Israel and maybe Hungary's Orban and Argentina's Milei. The rest of the world is now united in horror at what Trump has just promised the Israelis, something that he can't even deliver. I suspect that he had a sort of brainwave overnight, didn't think through the consequences, and in the succeeding days has been desperately trying to flesh out the idea and digging himself deeper and deeper into a hole. But the next episode is going to be a blinder, the visit of the King of Jordan. How excruciating that is going to be, to watch how the King of Jordan weasels his way out of this one, because Trump has ventriloquized him to say that he loves the idea along with everybody else in the world. And he's going to have to somehow say, sorry, you misunderstood, because it would be almost literally suicide for Jordan. It's a complete non-starter. So that is going to be one to watch in the coming days. I think the King of Jordan is due.
Well, again, Trump kind of let something out that was slightly out of the script, which is that when you mention Jordan, surely you're inferring to the West Bank and Palestinians being pushed out of the West Bank into Jordan. I mean, that's kind of inferred in that reference. So again, this is also a part of the Israeli radical far-right agenda, which is to push as many Palestinians out and annex the West Bank. Trump himself has probably promised Mary Madelson, his biggest donor, that he is going to support the annexation of the West Bank and the Jordan Valley and Judea and Samaria, as the Israelis refer to these areas. So in addition to Gaza, Peter, you have that situation, and it seems like there are people that are looking for opportunities to solve these two problems in one fell swoop or one after the other. I mean, what about that side of things? And what is Jordan's position's pretty firm, isn't it? They're not entertaining the forced displacement of Palestinians. Peter, go ahead.
Yeah, one wonders if Trump really knows what he's saying, or whether he ever looks at a map. And the way he talks about the Palestinians returning to Gaza. Well, they're not returning. They're there. They're there, man. They're returning to northern Gaza. He has a very shaky grasp of geography and facts. And one does begin to worry a little bit for the state of his intellect. But let's be charitable again. Whatever words he uses, whether he chooses to call the West Bank Judea and Samaria like the Israelis, or recognizes their sovereignty, it will not make any difference. He recognized their sovereignty over East Jerusalem. He recognized their sovereignty last time he was president over the Golan. Has it made any difference? No, things were already bad. The things are as they were. And the US is in splendid isolation in these postures. But they are verbal. More important, I think, is the fact that a new dynamic is about to start with the release of those key political prisoners, Barghouti and Sadat. Barghouti is the Palestinian Mandela. It's that important. Frankly, I'm amazed that the Israelis have conceded his release. Maybe they were thinking that would embarrass Hamas, create a rivalry among the Palestinian leadership, and it certainly will. But it's going to change the whole dynamic. The Palestinians will, if Barghouti is released, as seems 90% certain now, will have a voice suddenly. Until now, who has been the Palestinian voice? Hamas have been disqualified. Obviously, we don't want to hear from them. And Abbas is disqualified. He represents only himself. Maybe a new dynamic will start. Maybe Barghouti will practice some shock and awe and call for elections. What a shock that would be, to hold the West to its own rhetoric about democracy and call for elections, which the West has prevented the holding of elections since Hamas won last time round in 2005, and the West was not going to allow that to happen again. So the worm may turn, and the new dynamic may be about to start.
Yeah, and that's one of the problems, Peter, that the Palestinian movement or liberation movement faces, is they don't have a face to the movement, like so many other movements around the world have that figurehead, have that spokesperson, have that face, that leader that the world can channel their sort of attention to, and they don't have that. And to be fair, any potential Palestinian leaders have been assassinated or imprisoned, like Marwan Barghouti. So that would be significant, Peter. I mean, he is regarded by most Palestinians that I know and speak to as, kind of not founding fathers, but that type of figure for Palestine. So it would go a long way in terms of getting the message across to the world, because it's not just about Palestinians, it's what the world sees, and the world's always looking for a face, a leader. So that would be something, certainly, Peter. I mean, on what about on the issue of normalization? Because Trump was asked point blank in a press conference where he was sitting in front of the fireplace with Netanyahu, and a journalist shouted out, "What about Saudi Arabia? Are they demanding a Palestinian state?" And Trump said, "Nope." But that's not what I heard the Saudi spokesperson say just a couple of days ago. They say that there'll be no normalization until there's real moves made towards peace in a Palestinian state. So that's the president of the United States is basically misrepresenting policy of the major, Arab superpower in the region, that is quite critical in this Abraham Accords that Trump and Jared Kushner floated across in his last term that a lot of people can see it's an utter failure. A lot of people argue, Peter, it led to October 7th. But Trump says, and the Republicans and Murdoch and Fox News say it was a resounding success. They brought peace to the Middle East. And all we need is to reboot the Abraham Accords, normalization of the Arab states with Israel. Where are we on that score, Peter?
Well, Trump has just scored a magnificent own goal on normalization. The mere talk of the forced displacement of Gazans would be enough to stop contemplating normalization, which they weren't contemplating anyway. I've been saying for years now that it's like the dance of the seven veils with the Saudis and normalization. It's always just over the horizon. They never drop the last veils. There's always a new condition that they dream up. And now there's a serious one about progress towards statehood. So given the even more poisoned atmosphere that's being created, it's now totally off the table that Saudi could normalize with Syria on any conceivable time frame. But let Trump go on believing that. Maybe that's the mirage which is carrying him forward. But the Abraham Accords to date have only been bad for the Arabs and for the Palestinians. They emboldened Netanyahu to do what he's been doing in Gaza and the West Bank, made him think that the Arabs could be discounted, that the Arabs had been bought off and didn't care about the Palestinians. But the other net result of this performance in Washington this week has been that Trump and Netanyahu have come quite close to reawakening the Arab tiger. The Arab tiger, which has been dormant for over 20 years. And the Arabs have been supine, they have been political eunuchs, neutered. They've behaved like neutered politicos, unable to unite, unable to express themselves even in support of the Palestinians. But now Trump has managed to put the backs of the key Egyptians and Jordanians against the wall. And they are now united. There is now a kind of new front, or confrontation front, it used to be called, back in the good old days when there was a confrontation front that also included Syria. And maybe Syria will come into the equation as well, because the new regime there will not want 500,000 more Palestinians streaming over the Golan border. So this has been so seismic that it's radicalized the Arab world to some extent, I think. And that Arab tiger is possibly beginning to reawaken. Certainly the language used by the Saudis is stiff and uncompromising, stiffer under the leadership now of the younger Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, than it ever was under previous Saudi kings. Saudi Arabia, to some extent, is returning to the diplomacy of Saud al-Faisal, the very distinguished foreign minister from 30, 40 years ago. Saudi Arabia is beginning to remember that its name is the Saudi Arab Kingdom, and the Arab countries are rediscovering their Arabity.
And Peter, already there's kind of walkbacks happening in Washington here. This is on the news wires just after the statement. Immediately there was Trump walks back. No, there's no boots on the ground. You misunderstood us. The president didn't mean that. His press secretary was deployed as well. So, you see this kind of evasive action on there. So already there's all sorts of hedging going on here. And I also have to ask as well, the situation in Syria, the timing of the collapse of Syria, the collapse of the Bashar al-Assad government, and Israel moving into the Golan Heights, Mount Hermon, really taking strategic advantage militarily, liquidating Syria's military. It's paradigm shifting for the region. And then, do you see the timing of that? And then this type of power plays happening here over Palestine. Hezbollah is also quite exposed with the collapse of Syria. How do these things relate, Peter?
Well, Syria has never been weaker. Syria is prostrate on the ground. They're still in the dreadful economic state that they were when Assad was still around. They still only get like 1 hour of electricity a day. And the rulers, although they cut through the corrupt Syrian army like a knife through butter, they virtually without a fight. They're struggling against the Kurds in the north, who are serious fighters and would not capitulate like the conscripts of Assad's army. And the current regime's forces are very thin on the ground. They may have fewer than 50,000 troops for the entire country, while they face security problems in several pockets, including the Druze area and including the Alawite area, as well as the Kurdish area. So they're pretty thin on the ground and finding it struggling to impose themselves in many places. There's not much organized opposition other than from the Kurds, but Joulani's position is fairly precarious, and he's therefore kowtowing to America, kowtowing to Israel. He's desperate for economic help, desperate to have sanctions lifted, and he's making progress on that. The Europeans are clearly heading in that direction. The Americans have lifted some of the oil sanctions, but this is his key objective now, because he'll be toast if he doesn't like Assad, and for the same reasons. If he can't give the people more than 1 hour of electricity a day, he's going to be toast quite soon. So that's what's going on with Syria. It's all about Syria playing the nice guy with America and Israel, just so they can get sanctions lifted. After that, well, we'll all see. But let's not overlook the fact that for many, many years, Syria under Assad was no threat to Israel. I once asked the Syrian foreign minister, Shara, why don't you make a little trouble on the Golan? I shouldn't have said this. I was in my final days as British ambassador, and this was totally against British policy. But I asked, why? I find it surprising that you never make the least bit of trouble on the Golan. And he said, you're crazy. The Israelis would just bomb the hell out of us in Damascus. And that was true. And Syria did nothing for many, many years. Towards the end of the Assad period, they did, of course, help Hezbollah. But Hezbollah, for 16 years, held the ring in southern Lebanon. Effectively, they acted like Israel's border guards. They were also guarding Lebanon at the same time. But for 16 years, there was no trouble between Hezbollah and Israel. So for the Palestinians, of course, it's been a terrific loss. the last Arab country that really stood up for them, Syria, is gone. And their key ally, Hezbollah, has been gravely weakened and must now look to its domestic position inside Lebanon, which is threatened. As I said before, there are new irons in the fire. New dynamics are starting to be created. We mentioned Barghouti, a new leader for the Palestinians, who will be speaking probably from Turkey, which itself is set to create military bases in Syria, which will interest Israel. Some observers are beginning to fantasize about Turkey becoming part of the resistance, this new resistance front. And I think if I was an Israeli military planner, I would be making contingency plans for conflict with Turkey.
Yeah, there's definitely new power shifts, definitely in the Middle East. What I think what happened in December with the collapse of the Assad government is historic, and in terms of realignment, potential realignments in the region, as significant as a Six-Day War or after the Yom Kippur in '73. This is what we're looking at here. So a lot of countries, the Arabs, monarchs, for instance, their future is certainly Jordan. There's a lot of pressure potentially on Jordan. And if the Jordanian Hashemite monarchy falls, King Abdullah, and let's face it, that's a possibility, albeit managed by the U.S. and British, whatever that transition is. But that sends a really big signal to the rest of the GCC Gulf countries that you could be next. I mean, it just shows you how fragile things are. Like, as you said, Peter, everything's fine until it's not. That's actually a saying they have in the Middle East, in Lebanon anyway. Everything's fine until it's not. And certainly we're looking at those potential things happening. But what about Egypt, Peter? What about Egypt? Trump is talking about my friend, the general, al-Sisi in Egypt, and he's spoken to him. He likes the idea. Egypt's not really entertaining an influx of Palestinians coming over the border in Rafah. What about that situation, Peter?
Well, Egypt has been the chief eunuch, the chief castrato to the court of the Americans and the Israelis for a number of years. There is only one thing that could make Egypt man up. And that one thing is what Trump and Netanyahu have just gone and done, and that's effectively threatened Egypt with a huge influx of Palestinians from Gaza. That is the one thing that could make the Egyptians flex their military muscles. It would be existential for them. They cannot tolerate having Palestinians pushed over the border into Egypt. It would be the end of Egypt as we know it. And for that reason, I don't think it's going to happen. You know, let's end on an optimistic note and assess the situation today for what it is. And what it is a return to the status quo ante October 2023. The Israelis are on the point of final withdrawal from Gaza. Palestinian prisoners and Israeli hostages will have been released. Hezbollah will be back to looking after its fortunes inside Lebanon. That is the actual situation. Leave the fears on one side about what happens next. The actual situation will be a return to the status quo ante. And if you'd asked me 2 years ago, or October, when this all started, I'd have predicted the outcome is going to be a return to the status quo ante. And that is where we almost are, with new fears for the future, but also new hopes.
And you probably saw this development here. So the United States is sanctioning the International Criminal Court. Donald Trump signed an executive order, and I believe they may even be targeting individuals as well in these Caesar's sanctions style of going after individuals. But so this has created shockwaves through the NGO, international civil society networks and so forth, through the UN. Okay, U.S. is not a signatory to the Rome Statute, neither is Israel. Nonetheless, Netanyahu is indicted as an individual, as is Yoav Gallant, the defense minister, as well, for war crimes against humanity. And the U.S. reaction is basically to say these are baseless charges, and we're going to sanction the institution. So they're going after their money, they're going after bank accounts, things like this. Is this a good idea, Peter? Because, there's 140 or 25 odd countries signed to this.
At the moment, I'm an incorrigible optimist, and I think this is great. This is totally bringing America into disrepute. The scales are falling from people's eyes about Uncle Sam being benign. And he's united literally the rest of the world against the United States. And he's driven the final nail into the coffin of that much used favorite phrase of the Biden era and the Starmer era, the rules-based order. For shame. No American spokesman could allow those words to pass their lips at a time when they are pursuing, like outlaws, the International Criminal Court. So I think we won't be hearing about the rules-based order very much in future. I pity the ICC judges and officials, but this is testimony to their success. They have drawn blood. They've made the court much more, and Trump has managed to make the court much more important than it was. He's raised the stakes. It's another own goal. And it really, I worry slightly for his sanity that he can't see this. I mean, he's way out there on the autistic spectrum. He simply cannot see himself as the world sees him. I'd just like to recommend a book I've been reading in which he appears. This book here, I don't know if you can see what yes. I'm holding up, but it's the American Psycho by the wonderful Bret Easton Ellis, and it was a film with Christian Bale. And Trump is not actually the American Psycho in the book, I hasten to reassure, but he appears as a constant leitmotif. Christian Bale in the film is a real violent psycho. But all the time he's running across Donald Trump. He's going to Trump Tower, or he's going to some Trump event. So Donald Trump is kind of the alter ego of the American Psycho. And note the title, American Psycho, not just Psycho or New York Psycho, but American Psycho. And that's the point of the book, that the writer is explaining how America has psychotic tendencies, and they are brought to a culmination by this half-deranged president who sometimes does useful things by accident.
Yeah, this is the magic of Trump. We used to call it in 2016, like, whether he intended to or not, he just somehow exposes something that wasn't exposed previously, and it's often unintended, and the results are that it does cause a visceral reaction. Now, that's one thing domestically, politically in the US, Peter, but a visceral global reaction to the United States, this is different than Democrat, Republican, or anti-Trump sentiments in the US, because we rely on our partners to get things done in the world, and you cannot be isolated and still get the level of cooperation. I can't tell you how many times the US has used the ICC to nail people that they didn't like, governments they didn't like, and so, too many times, including Vladimir Putin. And so the right have this rhetoric, oh, we don't need the UN, we don't need the WHO. The pharmaceutical company needs the WHO, let me tell you, to get to as a marketing vehicle. Oh, we don't need the ICC. Well, the CIA uses the ICC. They have people in the ICC. So this is an instrument of US power. And I'm not sure if everyone in the Trump camp understands this. I mean, I'm glad to see USAID be dismantled, Peter. But that's also a key tool of U.S. empire. So, they might not want to if they want to stay the global hegemon, they might not want to get rid of, throw the baby out with the bathwater on that. I mean, that was an incredible development as well, Peter. I mean, you know very well about USAID and how far their tentacles extend into Syria as well, with the white helmets, etc. But what did you think about this development?
US aid, yeah, Trump is practicing shock and awe, isn't he? And in a way, it's admirable, the way he's gone to town, straight out of the blocks. And maybe this is the only way to shake up an administration. And he doesn't have much time. In no time, we'll be into the campaign for the midterms. A new US president, it's generally said, has only a year to get something done. Well, he may be trying to do some of the wrong things, but you have to, in a way, to admire the audacity and the willingness to use new tactics, even if they're aggressive and brazen. But you have to admire the audacity of trying to bring into the administration someone like Kennedy, the skeptic as regards healthcare, Tulsi Gabbard, the intelligence skeptic. You have to concede reluctant admiration, I think, for these acts, and take the rough with the smooth, maybe. What Trump is doing to combat wokeness as well, and net zero. These are all pluses in my book. And I won't say they compensate for his dreadful positions on Israel, but even there, as I explained, he may have a hidden agenda, and he's manipulating the Israelis as he manipulates everybody else. Again, you have to take the good with the bad. It's good that he's brought to heel an agency which was out of control, pursuing woke policies all over the world. He doesn't seem to be against the worst side of US aid, the way it was used as a tool of American imperialism. He's gone after the easier target of DEI. But again, sometimes he does a good thing for the wrong reason. I'll settle for that.
Yeah, it's something I did not see that coming, Peter. That took me by surprise, and a lot of people by surprise, just to see all of these programs, opposition media in Georgia, Bulgaria, Ukraine, Serbia, the whole of Eastern Europe, plus the Middle East, plus all the chicanery with Syria, plus Africa. I mean, literally, all that fifth column. The U.S. has spent decades building these fifth columns in all of these countries. And quite a few of those, the rug has been pulled out from under them. So we'll see how this develops. I'm sure that they're going to try to rescue some of the more valuable aspects of this. I don't know if you agree or not.
Well, I think there may be some rowing back on that and recreation of the model, but you've got the Musk factor here as well. I admit I was surprised as well that Musk has been given so much leash. I thought he was going to be frustrated, kicking his heels, but he got stuck. He's like the big kid in the playpen throwing all the toys out of the playpen, and some of them will have to be brought back. But for now, we can enjoy the spectacle.
No, absolutely. Well, look, Peter, I really appreciate you joining us. It's obviously a very important time in the region, in the Middle East, in the world, certainly for the United States. This is a major, major potential historic transition, realignment for the world. The new Secretary of State said in an interview that we need to look at a multipolar world. I was shocked to hear that from Marco Rubio. So things are happening, and we really appreciate your insight and your perspective on this. It's been really, really informative, and I hope we can continue this conversation again.
It's been a pleasure, Patrick. Thanks for having me.
Great. There he goes, ladies and gentlemen. That is Peter Ford. He is the former ambassador to Syria for Great Britain. What we're going to do now, however, is we're going to transition to a break here at the Alternate Current Radio Network. And when we come back, we're going to do a little bit of a revisiting of some of these big geopolitical issues. I will share with you my thoughts as well in the second hour of Overdrive. So look forward to that. And again, thank you for joining us on the live streams, everybody. It's been great to interact with some of you as well on the comment streams. But stay with us and enjoy the music of Joseph Arthur. We'll be right back.